It's time for Hostel Discourse. Here's your host, David Rolfing.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Hostel Discourse. We have a great show in store for you on the special Monday released episode. In just 5 days, the UFC's two-weight world champion Conor McGregor will be fighting one of the best boxers of all time, the undefeated Floyd Mayweather. So we will be discussing our thoughts on that fight. Plus, we have another double-header debate tonight. Debate number one is, who is the most entertaining American athlete of all time? And debate number two, should mixed martial arts do away with decisions? Just a quick reminder, the episode time codes are in the show notes, so if you want to check there, you can skip around to the debates or just stick through the whole show. That is up to you. But before we begin, let me introduce you to today's podcast crew. With me, as always, Jacob Hunter in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Hello, faithful listeners.
And back again, Joe Kuiper from Oklahoma City.
Hello, everybody.
And another fan favorite guest back again, Chris Fisher from New York City.
Woohoo!
What's up, homies?
And first time guest, a better Jared from Fayetteville, Arkansas, Tanner McCord.
Greetings from Arkansas.
Woo pig.
All right, so let's talk about this boxing match. I have many opinions on this fight. I would love to hear some casual fight fan opinions. I'd say Tanner and I are the kind of big UFC fans of the group, but I would love to hear what the casual sports fans' perspective is on this fight and kind of what you've heard overall, and what's your impression on what's going to go down on August 26th.
I'm very casual, and I'm kind of struck by how I've never heard an informed opinion say that Conor McGregor is going to win this fight. It's all like everyone is just talking about how much of a no-brainer this is, and it's to the point that like the whole event is starting to not really sound like a competition, but just more of a money grab. So I don't have a whole lot of, I don't feel like there's a whole lot of credibility in this fight.
Yeah, I mean, from your perspective, it looks like a money grab. I think from every side you look at it, it's kind of a money grab. From the boxing side, from the UFC side, from Conor's camp and Floyd's camp, I think they're all kind of in it for the money. They knew it would be really big. And I mean, Conor really has nothing to lose besides maybe his future boxing fights. But even if he lost to the best of all time, I think he'd still have a future in boxing if he wanted to, as long as he didn't get destroyed. But he's making $100 million off of this fight, he claims. Floyd's probably making twice that, and who knows how much the promoters like the UFC and Mayweather Productions or whatever it's called are making. But yeah, I say it's a big money grab, and they've definitely been doing a lot to make the fight seem legitimate from both parties. And it's hard not to fall into the trap of thinking that all their promotion, all the videos of Conor training are legit and that Conor's a legit boxer. I mean, he doesn't have no chance, but he has a very small chance.
Does Conor McGregor want to pursue boxing, or is he like just doing this for a one-time thing? Do you know?
Conor has said that he would like to fight in boxing in the future and the UFC. I'm pretty sure his contract will force him to have some UFC fights, even though he'll make like, I don't know, a tenth of the money he'll make off of this fight. So I think the UFC will force him to fight MMA a couple more times. But I mean, the money for him is in boxing is what it looks like. So I think he'll probably box after this fight.
Conor McGregor is a very good UFC fighter. We really don't know how good of a boxer he is, but he is like probably the world's best self-promoter, and he has almost made $100 million from this fight revenue from his own self-promotional skills, because he really pushed this hard. Here's what interests me about this fight. There's a few different storylines that have grabbed me. One is the last time we had a fight that had this much hype in mainstream sports, not just in the boxing world, not just in the UFC world, it was one of the biggest letdowns in sports in a long time. It was Mayweather-Pacquiao. They had been talking about the fight for over a decade, and it was probably more of a letdown just because it drew a more mainstream audience, and I think the mainstream audience wasn't really aware of the kind of incredible defensive and tactical nature that Floyd Mayweather is. He's not a big knockout guy by any means, but he's probably the best defensive boxer of all time. So it has a lot of hype to live up to, but at the same time, I think people are a little more wary to place expectations so high for entertainment. I'm also just really curious to see the crossover, because we've never really had a fight like this either, especially since MMA is relatively young as a sport, where we're seeing an MMA fighter go to boxing. Usually people come from wrestling or sometimes from boxing and they'll go to MMA, but never kind of the reverse. So that will be interesting. But mostly what's interested me about this fight is I like to follow the activity in Vegas. And people have alluded to earlier, and I'm by no means an expert, but any of the experts you listen to say McGregor has no chance. Some people said maybe if they fought with UFC gloves. I think Floyd would have no chance if it was an MMA fight. But basically, it sounds like Mayweather can't lose. McGregor opened at I think roughly 10-1 odds to win. And I think the odds makers, especially with this kind of event where it's just really tough to predict, have not a great idea of what to open it at. And there has been so much money to come in on McGregor. I don't know if it's because people think he has a better shot than he actually does, or if they're enticed by the kind of longer odds that pay out better. Last I heard, about 80% of the money is on McGregor. And it wasn't until yesterday they took a huge bet on Mayweather. I think the owner of the Sacramento Kings put an $850,000 bet on Mayweather, something like that.
Yeah, Forbes just mentioned that they had an article today that 95% of the money was on McGregor.
Dang, get your facts right, Chris.
I can understand that. So I was listening to a podcast, Brendan Schaub's podcast, The Fighter and the Kid. He's going to be an analyst for Showtime on Fight Night. He's a former UFC fighter. He got a 26-1 odds bet in Vegas that McGregor would win one round. So he put $20,000 on it. I would have bet $1,000, I think, for those odds that he'd win 1 out of 12 rounds. I would have bet $1,000 on that for sure.
When did he get that kind of bet? I feel like there hasn't been anything close to that in a long time.
I think right when it opened up, that 1 round bet.
It was a wild scene, as far as kind of wild as money line and spread movements get in Vegas, because the odds makers didn't really know where to open it, and they opened it so much more Mayweather heavy than the public was wanting to do, and the money just flew in so hard on McGregor that the odds just got hammered down to now it's I think it's Conor's a 5 or 6 to 1 to win, which if you listen to any experts, it sounds like that's just not even close to what the actual percentage of the fight would be.
I'd certainly put money on McGregor winning. I feel like isn't championship boxing 12 rounds, 12 2-minute rounds?
12 3-minute.
A lot of boxing, I feel like, is pace and strategy, whereas MMA is a 15-minute fight max. Or I guess they move championship fights up to 5 rounds of 5 minutes. But an average fight is 3 5-minute rounds. And I feel like the one thing that could get Conor early and get him to lose this fight pretty quick would be him coming out really hot, winning the first round or two, and then just kind of getting exhausted and getting beat down and overpowered and just kind of outplayed defensively. But I'd certainly put money on at least 1 round for McGregor.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with those crazy odds.
Yeah, if you got those odds, I would too. That'd be...
Conor, nicknamed Mystic Mac for his fight predictions, predicts that he's going to knock him out within 4 rounds if they have 10-ounce gloves. But they have put in a request to drop the glove size to 8 ounces. For reference, UFC gloves are 4 ounces. So Floyd has fought with 8-ounce gloves at the lighter weights in his career. So it's not something he's not used to or anything, but the less padding would make it easier for Conor or give him a greater chance of knocking out Mayweather. So his prediction, if they're in the lower size gloves, is he'll knock him out within the first 2 rounds. So obviously Conor's strategy is going to be to go hard in the first couple of rounds and try to knock him out, which he probably won't be able to do because, as you said, Mayweather's the best defensive boxer ever. My guess is he'll tire out and get picked apart for the next 8 rounds after that. But I mean, there's a small chance of him knocking out Mayweather, but I'd say it's a very small chance.
Look, we are currently in a year where in the past 12 months, the Cubs have won the World Series and Donald Trump was elected president. So they say miracles come in threes, and I think this is the third. They don't actually say that, but I think that they should.
A guy who's never boxed beating the best boxer of all time.
I think it was off the Joe Rogan podcast. He was talking about...
Powerful Joe Rogan.
Yes. He was quoting someone as saying that once every decade, a fighter comes along and they just have what coaches call the kiss of death. And McGregor is alleged to have the kiss of death. So I think if McGregor wants to win this fight, it's definitely going to have to be by knockout. I think if it goes the full round and goes to decision, I don't think there's any way. I don't know. It'll be certainly interesting seeing the greatest striker from the UFC currently going against the greatest all-time defensively in terms of boxing.
And the media and the promotions have done a really good job of trying to get us to buy into the fact that he has a chance of knocking him out. They had a huge world tour, which was kind of seemed like WWE acting almost, where they cussed each other out for 30 minutes and went on speeches that they repeated like almost the exact same thing at each location. Conor did a much better job at trash talking than Mayweather did, but there's a clear strategy from both sides. Conor has been trying to show that he's a legit boxer. He had this sparring partner named Paulie Maggiano in his camp. This has been huge drama in the past couple weeks. Paulie's like a 2-time world boxing champion. He brought him in for sparring, and Conor, just like, this is coming from Paulie's perspective, went against normal boxing sparring ethics. He like put him in a crappy house. He wouldn't spar him at the times he told him to. Usually you bring in multiple guys to fight 12 rounds. So one guy will fight 4, one guy will fight 3, one guy 5 or whatever. But he made Paulie fight all 12 rounds, and Paulie's hasn't fought for like a whole year. He's not in 12-round fight shape. Conor's clear strategy was to get video footage, which he did, post it online, which he signed a non-disclosure agreement that he said he wouldn't. They edited together this like 5-second clip of Conor, what looks like he's dropping Paulie like onto the canvas with a punch, when really Paulie broke down the clip. It's really like 3 different exchanges edited together to look like he knocked him down. But according to him, Conor really kind of pushed down the back of his head after he landed a punch. And so he like kind of tripped him up a little bit. But it really looks like Conor knocked him down in this video. And it's doing a really good job of stirring people's conversation to be like, wow, Conor like knocked out an amazing world champion boxer. Like maybe he does have a chance to knock out Floyd, which it's just all strategy to make us think that, to get more people to buy the fight, when in reality, as Chris said, like the last Floyd fight was a snooze fest. This one, honestly, I think it'll be more exciting just because their boxing levels are a lot more different.
There's a big disparity between skill sets.
Exactly.
I did not know any of what you just said, David, and that makes me feel like if/when Conor McGregor loses this fight, he has a lot to lose as far as credibility from his celebrity status. Would you see any of that kind of stuff happening?
I don't
Conor
think so.
lost. Conor really has nothing to lose. Mayweather has everything to lose in this. His legacy, he's 49-0 right now. People are wearing t-shirts that say 49-1 if Conor wins this fight, because he has everything to lose. Conor doesn't have anything to lose. He's never had a professional boxing match. Conor lost a fight in the UFC against Nate Diaz, handled the loss really well, came back and beat him in the second fight. But like somehow when Conor lost that fight, like he was a humble loser. He's really good at talking, and people were still just as excited about seeing him fight again, even though he lost. So even if Conor loses this, I don't think his like credibility will go down whatsoever.
Not only that, but it's not a UFC match. I mean, Conor's primary way that he sort of made it, so to speak, is through the UFC. I don't think he, like David said, he doesn't really have anything to lose. To reference what David was saying earlier about the sparring match, just kind of giving an analysis of Conor, I think he likes to feel in control and likes to be in control as far as like, man, I'm speaking like I know him. But just like from watching his fights and seeing how he kind of reacts to these things, Yeah, I think he's very measured. Before, was it the Aldo fight that he knocked Aldo out in 13 seconds? There was a press conference beforehand, and McGregor was quoted as saying, Aldo overextends on left hooks all the time. What's going to happen is I'm going to step back. He's going to overextend on a left hook, and I'm going to hit him one time in the jaw, and he's going to be out. And in 13 seconds, the first 13 seconds of the first round, that's exactly what happened. He just kind of knows his opponents. He's a freak when it comes to controlling his own destiny, I guess. He came out in that world tour, that goofy world tour where they just trash talked each other and said, Floyd, I've watched every punch that's made you stutter. I've watched every punch that's knocked you down. I know everything. I know where to hit you. And I don't know. I think Conor is measured enough not to win, but to at least give the people as good of a show as they're hoping for, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned him liking to be in control, but the one time he wasn't in control, when he got clipped by a good combination from Nate Diaz, and then he tried to shoot and take down a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and then got submitted by Nate Diaz.
Right.
I feel like that one time where he felt out of control and he was like scared, he made a stupid decision and then got finished. And I feel like there's no way Mayweather will let him feel in control, because that's what Mayweather's known for. He's known for dictating the pace and just dominating his opponents strategically. So
that's a good point, David.
David, this is piggybacking off of what you're saying. A thing that I'm curious about more as to just whether or not he actually means it. And you were talking about how Mayweather won't deviate from his plan and will just pick him apart because he's the most tactical and skilled defensive boxer of all time. But Floyd just like in the last week had a sit down interview with Stephen A. Smith, and one of the questions was basically, do you feel like you owe the public? And he went on record with this ESPN interview saying, this can't be a defensive fight. I have to go to him. I owe the public because of the Pacquiao fight. They weren't pleased with that. They're going to be pleased with this fight here. And I'm wondering if you guys at all believe that Floyd will actually try to be more aggressive than normal and pursue a knockout more than he normally would, or if he's just saying that to kind of keep the propaganda of this fight going forward.
I don't think so. I think how good does a clean 50-0 record look? Nice even number, all, will this even go on his record?
Yeah, it will.
Yeah. Okay, cool. You can cut that. But like a clean 50-0 record just looks so pretty and so nice. And I feel like Mayweather's going to pursue that and pursue a check for winning, a little extra money for winning over the entertainment of the people that are watching it. Personally.
Yeah, I agree. To me, it sounds like Conor and him are both saying whatever they can to get as many buys as they can to make as much money as possible. Maybe Floyd will try to be aggressive in the first couple minutes. If he feels like he's in danger, he'll probably go back to what he's good at and he'll win the fight. Even if it's boring, he'll win the fight how he's going to dictate it. And I doubt that's aggressive. He's smaller than Conor. I don't think he's going to be able to knock him out and fight that aggressively. So I don't believe that statement, but who knows? Hopefully it's true. It'd be a more exciting fight.
As of now, do any of y'all have money on this fight?
No, you looking for some action?
No.
Want to give me 26-1 odds that Conor wins one round?
Hard pass.
Chris, I'll throw a bet down with you at the end of the podcast, or we can figure it out later.
Good content. How about right in the middle of the podcast?
I agree.
Well, let's do it then. What do you want?
I don't know. I don't really care.
He cowers.
Yeah, boo.
No, I just don't know enough.
So took the challenge.
I want to root for McGregor. So if you want to take the Mayweather side of whatever bet's out there, I'll do it.
You do? You want to take McGregor?
Yeah, purely entertainment. I don't know anything.
All right, I'll take Mayweather, but I'm probably still going to cheer for McGregor.
All right, hedging your happiness.
You heard it here first, listeners.
Yeah, the deal is done. Okay, time to move on to this week's debate questions. First, I'm going to read you some fan responses we got for the first debate. This question is, most entertaining American athlete of all time. First, Ryan Token's answer, Michael Vick. Hunter Hart's answer, Tiger Woods. Michael Dane's answer, Mr. T. Did he play a sport?
Was he a football player at all?
He was a boxer.
I know that he had his whole
Mr. T.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Mr. T was a fictional character.
No.
Maybe he's trolling us.
Trolls.
And finally, The last response at Retro Avenger said Michael Jordan.
Too easy.
So, who is the most entertaining American athlete of all time? Jacob will be our judge. We each have our own individual answers. Jacob, I'll hand it over to you and you can dictate the debate.
Sorry, before we start, the Wikipedia article says, Mr. T, born Lawrence Turode, is an American actor and retired professional wrestler known for his roles as B.A. whatever. I'm not going to try to read these names. He was a wrestler.
A wrestler.
So kind of a joke, but still.
Not trolling after all.
All right. I'm very excited to judge these. We will start with 45-second opening statements going from left to right as I see the competitors on my Google Hangout screen. So we start with my oldest friend, Tanner.
Hey, okay, my candidate for the most entertaining American athlete is Mr. Steph Curry himself. I was thinking about it today, and I decided that Steph Curry is so entertaining that he's ruining youth basketball. All the kids want to be like Steph. They're wearing number 30. I have a cousin in 8th grade who plays basketball. She wears number 30. Can you guess why? It's because of Mr. Steph Curry. Everyone wants to shoot threes nowadays. Everyone's kind of just buying hard into this acrobatic, wild, reckless basketball that he somehow does with more success than anyone in the whole NBA. So having someone who plays so reckless, who puts up so many points, breaks so many records, and puts up 25, 30 points a night, I think that's entertaining. So my candidate is Mr. Steph Curry.
Thank you. On to the next. Chris Fisher.
Hey, Tanner, would you like to know who Steph Curry's self-proclaimed favorite athlete of all time is?
Who's that, Chris?
That's Mr. Tiger Woods. Now, whether or not that's actually true, I don't know. But Tiger Woods is easily and undeniably the most entertaining American athlete of all time. I can prove it statistically. I can prove it with his intrigue on and off of the golf course. And I can prove it with the longevity of his entertainment value. Please ask away when you are ready, dear judge.
Thank you. I will ask when I am good and ready. David, you're up next.
Gladly. My answer for most entertaining American athlete is Cassius Clay, better known as Muhammad Ali. Ali is the most entertaining athlete because of his performances both inside and outside of the ring. There's a greatest of all time in every sport, but Ali blows all these out of the water because of his entertaining persona and his controversial viewpoints that he displayed outside of the ring. So I think that the combination of his feats inside the ring as one of the best boxers of all time, as well as his trash talking and his viewpoints that are still talked about to this day, even after his death a year ago. These are some of the reasons why he is so entertaining as an athlete.
All right. Good to hear. Now, last but not least, hopefully, Joe Kuiper.
Yes. Look, the correct answer to the question, who is the most entertaining athlete of all time, the only way you can describe the person that describes is with the following word, and that's Shaq-tastic. Because the most entertaining athlete is Shaquille O'Neal himself. Shaquille O'Neal was a basketball player, for those of you who don't know. Hopefully you do know, because he is a major personality. And after his basketball career, he went on to have a myriad of other pursuits, including rapping and movies. And I will get to those later.
So now we have chances. I want to give each of you, in order, 60 seconds at a time. Y'all did great on time, by the way. 60 seconds each to...
It's because Jared's not here.
Yeah.
Who is closest to 45 seconds? Because I think they should win.
Well, bummer for you, Joe.
Dang it.
I'll go back opposite order, and I want each of you to spend the next 60 seconds addressing each other's opening statements. So you might not have time to address everyone, but maybe single in on one or two arguments that you really want to address. So, Joe, you go first.
Okay, well, let me tell you what is not entertaining in life, and that is marital issues. Nobody wants to see a marriage fall apart. Nobody wants to see divorce. And yet with Tiger Woods, that's exactly what you get. You know, Tiger Woods was a great athlete, and he probably was fun to watch. But nowadays, he's just a sad show whenever he steps out onto a golf course, whenever he goes out in public, because people just know him as either A, the guy who had a bunch of hookers and basically ruined his marriage, or B, the guy who is dealing with injuries and is probably not going to come back to the golf course?
I'd like to go next.
Actually, I'm sorry. I have to go back in reverse order, like I said. So David's next.
I would reiterate those points Joe just made. Cheating on your wife with many other women, not very entertaining, just kind of sad and a little disturbing, as well as his current situations of injury and not playing as well as he used to. Steph Curry, Tanner, in your opening statement, you mentioned your sister wearing his jersey. Cousin. That doesn't have anything to do with him being entertaining.
No, but
cool.
she wears it. Here. I'll get on a point with that later.
Cool.
All right. And Joe, I mean, Shaq, yeah, he's been in movies and stuff. He's had some good interviews, but I feel like half of the equation with the most entertaining athlete is their entertainment they provide on the court or in their sport. And I feel like he, compared to these other athletes named, didn't do that much on the court as far as like greatest of all time level for basketball. So that makes him less entertaining to me.
All right, Chris, I will encourage you to attack other opening statements, as you will have time to rebut later on, but spend the time however you want.
I'm sorry, Joe and David. I did not know the question was, who is the most Christian and moralistic American athlete of all time? Are you kidding me? Marriage split-ups, hookers, drugs? That's not entertaining. That's what the country finds most entertaining. Look at what reality TV shows get the most clicks and views. Tiger Woods. Well, I won't go into my own thing. Shaq. Great personality, very charismatic, top 10 player of all time, but not nearly to the magnitude of especially two others on this list. Steph Curry is, I don't even think, halfway through his career. I just feel like he doesn't have the resume to compete with the other three on this list. If nothing else, because of the time he's spent in his sport and in the spotlight so far. Very, very fresh, still very young. Last but not least, Muhammad Ali, obviously very famous, obviously incredibly influential. My one argument to that was he did not have nearly the media exposure available to him, mostly because of technological advances that these other three did. We're in the midst of the social media boom right now. Obviously, TV, radio have all advanced drastically since that point, and it is so much easier for an athlete to gain a lot of exposure and thus be more famous and ultimately more entertaining.
All right, Tanner, you got 60 seconds.
Fresh and young with back-to-back MVP and 2 championships under his belt, Chris. Also, Chris, I am going to take this opportunity to reiterate what the other two said and kind of put Tiger in the dirt one last time. I think if you would have chosen Tiger Woods in 2009, which was 8 years ago, sure, yeah, I could go for that. Ridiculous in his time. I want this on record, so I'm going to say it on the podcast. I've said in 2009, I stated Tiger Woods will not win another major championship, and he certainly has not. David, against you, I'm going to back up what Chris said. The one form of media that sticks out to me about Muhammad Ali is him with the famous picture of him standing over the dude. Other than that, I haven't really been entertained in any way by Muhammad Ali. I haven't seen anything about him. I haven't really taken time to read about him.
Now we'll do, you can go a little over a minute. I'll let you guys rebut each other. So since David, you were most recently addressed, go ahead and go after some of the points that Chris and Tanner just made.
Yeah, I would love to. So you say that, or first to address Tanner, that since you don't know that much about him in current day, that they're not showing him as much as they are Steph, since he's currently playing, that he's not one of the most, or the most entertaining of all time. That doesn't matter. We're talking about the greatest, the most entertaining athlete of all time. So that doesn't mean our time. That means all time. During his time, he didn't have social media, but he dominated the platforms they did have, which were TV, radio, and print. He wasn't just a superstar in America. He was a worldwide superstar. He had multiple fights internationally, in Africa, in the Philippines. He was the most popular athlete during his time, even without social media. And I think that says something about his influence on the world and how everyone in the world was entertained, not just even America, without the use of social media. So I don't think that that is anything against his entertainment value. I think that's something that shows us how entertaining he actually was, even with their lower level of technology during his time.
Well said. Joe, Chris was the only one to address Shaq, I felt, in that last part. Do you have anything to say to him?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about Shaq Daddy, the Diesel, the Big Aristotle, many names which people refer to Shaq as. All fun, all entertaining.
The Big Shaqtus.
The Big Shaqtus, that's another. The thing is, Shaq is one of those beautiful situations where he had an amazing career and he fit into the perfect little spotlight where he's far enough back that we all remember him very fondly, but also far enough forward that he wasn't, condemned to be out of the media spotlight like what we've all been saying about Muhammad Ali. And the beauty about Shaq is that, people love to talk about three-pointers nowadays, and all the kids love to go out and shoot their deep three balls. But at the end of the day, when you go to SportsCenter Top 10 during the basketball season, the most commonly shown things are dunks on dunks on dunks. And that's one thing that Shaquille O'Neal did probably the best, and just pulling down big boards, being a 7'1", 300-pound dude, just bullying his way around the basketball court. That's entertainment. And he took that persona off the court, went into movies, went into rapping. He's been in Grown Ups 2. He was in Scary Movie 4, just a few. He's had like 24 appearances in movies. And all of these are just hilarious little renditions where you get a taste of the Shaq and why he's so popular and so well known.
Something that I think is kind of interesting, or at least important to this discussion, is how you guys went about deciding what it means to be the most important and how that led you to decide on your specific choice for this debate. I'll start with David on this one.
Sure. I mean, I mentioned a little bit before that I think, in my opinion, being entertaining both inside and outside of your sport is really important. A little bit of background on Ali's career. He was a 3-time heavyweight boxing champion. So he won the belt. He lost to Joe Frazier. Then he beat Joe Frazier to get his belt back, and then he beat him in a trilogy fight that took place in Manila, the Philippines. I mean, this fight trilogy is known as the best fight trilogy of all time. They're so evenly matched. They're both the top 2 heavyweights in the world. Heavyweight's considered the most kind of prestigious boxing class there is, weight class. His whole boxing career, he is definitely one of the best boxers of all time. But I think on top of that, kind of his political and views on the Vietnam War, which were going on at that time, made him stand out even more and put him in the public eye. He became a Muslim, changed his name to Muhammad, which is very controversial. It really split the public's opinion on him, but he used those religious beliefs and got his boxing license revoked for 4 years because he refused to be drafted into the war. He teamed up with Malcolm X as his mentor. His whole political and social movement during those 4 years when he wasn't boxing was all over the media, in the public eye, because the Vietnam War was so controversial at that time. So like, even when he wasn't fighting, he was still in the public eye. He was still on the TV being interviewed about the war and his views on race and politics. But then when he's fighting, his trash talk is known as the best of all time. And something about boxing, and I think MMA as well, is like, it's an individual sport. It's not a team sport like basketball. Golf is also individual, but boxing, fighting one-on-one, I think it gives them a really nice platform to really show their personalities. And he definitely did that. He showed his personality in his trash talk. He showed how eloquent of a speaker he was. I mean, he has so many quotes from random interviews where he's like pretty much speaking poems in his trash talk, rhyming, and just his way of speaking is unrivaled. And people kind of relate Conor McGregor to how he talks, but it's at a whole different level even than Conor McGregor, at just the way he trash talks his opponents in and out of the fights and gets into their heads. I mean, that's a little long-winded, but those are kind of the two areas inside and outside of the sport where he was really entertaining.
Yeah. What do you think it means for an athlete to entertain people?
Let somebody else take it, and then I'll answer it after them.
Cool.
I'm kind of ready to rebut David. I think part of entertaining people is through your sport. I think as far as entertaining athletes go through their sport, I feel like basketball is a sport that is transcended and been entertaining for as long as it's been around. I just looked it up because I thought they were around the same area, and Wilt Chamberlain was around the same time Muhammad Ali was, and people still talk about Wilt Chamberlain, and he was a legend back then just as much as he is now. And I think the relevancy of the sport of basketball has helped that a lot. I think that basketball has been a relevant, more widely followed kind of sport for the people for a longer time than boxing was. Boxing was huge back in Muhammad Ali's day, thus allowing him to entertain all the people that watched it. Realistically, it's kind of fallen off. I follow MMA. I love it. But I don't know if I could tell you an exciting boxing match coming up with the exception of McGregor Mayweather, and that's not even two guys competing for a title.
Dude, Canelo Triple G, that's supposed to be the fight.
Dude, Canelo is a monster, and I've watched some of his highlights. But still, as far as wide audiences go and your capability to entertain through your wide audiences, I feel like basketball has that. As for Steph, David, this is throwing it way back to when you asked about my cousin. Everyone rocks the number 30. And typically, if you ask them why, it's because Steph Curry has entertained them to the point where that's who they look up to in sports. That's certainly the case for my cousin. If you go onto the official NBA store website right now and you look up top jersey sales, it's going to go number 1, Steph Curry, number 2, LeBron James, and number 3, Kevin Durant. And to kind of put Steph and his popularity and his entertainment in perspective for you, the Warriors have 4 jerseys in the top 11. And so it's not like Steph is playing with scrubs or people that people don't know, but rather he is overshadowing other superstars. Games are put on Steph's shoulders, wins and losses, championships. People love Steph, and I think they're entertained by him. Joe, you mentioned earlier that how exciting it was for people to go just dunks on dunks on dunks, as Shaq did and was notorious for. But if I'm watching the SportsCenter Top 10 and I see Shaquille dunking on some poor soul like he does night in and night out, or if I see Steph Curry hitting a game-winning 3 against the Oklahoma City Thunder to tie the most threes made in a game at 12, I'm entertained by that. I think that's insane.
All right. Let's go, Chris. What is entertainment in sports, and why does Tiger personify it?
In sports, I think entertainment is a combination of greatness, general attention, and I would say overall fame. And maybe an element of excitement in all of that too. Normally I try to be super concise and have 2 or 3 points. It's just impossible with Tiger and this question. Joe, if you think Cassius to Muhammad is a cool name change, I got a better one for you. Eldrick to Tiger. That's pretty baller. But to go on top of that, I mean, Tiger just has so many deep levels of entertainment. So you guys are all basically making my points for me earlier in the show. First of all, you were saying he wasn't entertaining because of a scandal. Scandal is one of the most entertaining things in this country in the modern age. Tiger had off the course scandal, which was huge. He had an absolute flamboyant personality. He completely disrupted the world of golf, especially in an influential sense, a game that has a kind of is plagued by a nasty history of sexism and racism. Not only did he completely redefine what a golfer can look like on the course, with his brashness, his capabilities, and his overall attitude, but he made golf cool for people that it would never be cool to. He made it cool for basically a lot of people that aren't rich white men. I guess Arnold Palmer probably made it cool for people that weren't rich, but for people that aren't white, Tiger made the sport just blow up in popularity. On top of that, of all the athletes we're discussing tonight, he is easily the greatest in his own sport compared to those other athletes. He's at worst the second best golfer of all time. And my kind of kicker in all of this is ESPN has published for decades their top 100 most famous athletes list every year. There is one person that has been in the top 10 of that list, not even on the list, but the top 10 for 3 different decades. And for a continuous stretch of those 3 different decades. And that's Tiger Woods. You might say, hey, Chris, just because he's famous doesn't mean he's entertaining. But you're making my point earlier when you're saying Tiger's garbage now and he's done nothing. I totally agree. Tiger hasn't won since 2013. He hasn't won a major since 2008. He's hardly played golf, let alone has he been the dominant force he once was. Yet this year, he was still the number 10th most famous athlete in the world, according to ESPN and Forbes and their kind of data-driven fame rankings. So you've got someone who has obviously greatness within his sport, and he has revolutionized that sport. He's got scandal and just all sorts of different crazy entertaining aspects outside of that sport. He's had this just fall from grace that has been completely documented in the public eye for no other reason than just mass entertainment. I could go on. And if nothing else, golf is the most international of all these sports. The vast majority of golf fields are fewer than half Americans, especially when we're talking about the majors. So, Tiger, most entertaining.
I can tell you that as a kid growing up, I had the Tiger Woods hat, I had the Nike driver, Nike set of clubs. As a 22-year-old man now, watching him go through that crazy divorce, the crazy controversy, a DUI a month ago, I'm pretty bummed out, man. That was someone who I used to look up to wildly, helped me get into golf, and then just a bummer.
That's exactly the point, though. It's disappointing, but it's so documented because of the entertainment level. Tiger was literally a headliner today because his toxicology reports came out. We're still talking about Tiger Woods a decade after his last major win, and it's headline news. It's not even like back page of ESPN. I think some of this argument has kind of derailed from what entertaining actually means. Tiger draws more eyes, more attention than any of these guys ever have.
I just haven't been entertained recently by watching a childhood hero fall, is what I'll wrap my point up into.
All right, then that is a good segue to go to Joe.
Look, when it comes to being an entertaining athlete, being a great athlete is a phenomenal part of that, but it is not the only thing. You need to be both a spectacle on the court and you need to be a spectacle off the court. And I think the best example of that is Shaquille O'Neal being one of the best basketball players of all time, but second, being such a personality off the field, being the only one in this group of 4 who has had regular appearances in movies and regular appearances on talk shows, being just a TV and movie and music personality. That's what you think of when you think entertainment. You think movies, you think TV, you think music, and you think sports. And he is the entire package in that. He's funny. He's just a great guy. When I think about entertainment, I'm sorry, but I don't think about race discrimination or religious prejudice. And that's what I think of when I think of Muhammad Ali's legacy. He made a huge impact in those things. And if we were arguing for the greatest athlete or the most influential athlete of all time, then hands down, you could maybe maybe not hands down, but you could make that argument for certain for Muhammad Ali. But it wasn't things that entertained me. I'm not entertained by racial prejudice. And similarly, I am not entertained by the feeling that I get when I think about Tiger Woods' wife finding out that he's been cheating on her. There's things in headlines all the time about, mass murders and bombs going off and marital scandals. And those aren't things that are entertaining just because they're on the front page of a newspaper. Those are things that legitimately make people question the morals of the person and make people question why they supported him in the first place. I'm not entertained by Tiger Woods' fall from grace. I'm not entertained by the idea of him driving around while under the influence, potentially risking the lives of other drivers on the road. And when it comes to Steph Curry, he's a great guy. I enjoy watching him, but he's not the personality that Shaq is. And also he's just too young and hasn't made that much of an impact yet.
The public disagrees with you, Joe.
David, since I kind of rephrased the question, I'll give you just a few seconds if you want to add anything to your last statement.
I would say, to cover each of your picks, Muhammad Ali is more entertaining inside his sport with his skills and outside of the sport with his personality. Steph Curry, he might be the best basketball player right now, but he just doesn't have a remarkable personality that he'll be remembered for. Tiger Woods, yeah, he's maybe the first or second best golfer of all time, but his personality isn't, honestly, I don't know, I couldn't quote him or anything. Muhammad Ali has so many quotes outside of the ring because his personality was insane. Some people thought he was crazy. That's entertaining, that people hung on his every word. They wanted to know the next thing he's going to say, the next little quote he's going to have. I think his personality and his level in boxing were equally entertaining, and he was great in both areas. And I think Shaq has a great personality. He's really entertaining outside of basketball, but I don't think his skill level quite matched up with Muhammad Ali's in comparison in boxing.
All right. David, are you cool with that being your final statement, or do you have anything else you'd want to add on before we send it back around?
Yeah, that's my final statement.
Cool. Chris, you got 30 seconds to close.
I've gone into depth about Tiger's entertainment value. He has so much entertainment outside of the sport. Within the sport, he's the most dominant force golf has ever seen. He's had capabilities and talents to make shots that people have never seen. Probably the most memorable moment in golf history was Tiger Woods at the Masters with the Nike ball barely falling in. Outside of the course, people are still waiting on Tiger every day with all this different news. And we can pretend like it's not the truth, but today's public is obsessed with scandal and a lot more of bad news than good news. You might not want to call it entertainment, but when E! News and TMZ, along with the major broadcasting channels, are headlining Tiger's scandals or progressions or fall from grace, those are the drivers of modern day entertainment. And you couple that with Tiger's success inside the ropes, most entertaining American athlete of all time.
All right, Big Joe.
Yeah, when I think about entertaining athlete, I think about Shaquille O'Neal. If you want to argue most influential athlete, Muhammad Ali. If you want to argue biggest disappointment as a role model, you got Tiger Woods. If you want to argue best shooter behind the 3-point line, then you got Steph Curry. But if you argue most entertaining, you get Shaquille O'Neal. And that's best exemplified by his TV show Shaq Versus, where he would just go around, mess with other athletes, have a good time, challenge them in their own sport. And I'm going to close with this quote by Shaquille. I'm tired of hearing about money, 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 money. I just want to play the game, drink Pepsi, wear Reebok. That's entertainment.
That is simplicity.
Okay, Tanner, you've got the floor.
I think when you look at a team who sent 4 starters to the All-Star game this last year, you look at the one who's the most popular, who overshadows the rest, and that's Steph Curry. The jersey sales are there. You guys keep talking about how short his career has been. He's number 10 on the 3-point list already. That's crazy. Plays both sides of the ball. He had the number 1. He led the league in steals in 2016. Entertaining all the way around. The numbers have it. The personality has it. And if he's not remembered as a player, he'll be remembered for his adorable daughter, who's also just as entertaining as any athlete you can name during press conferences.
Well, I had forgotten how hard this job was. These were all really fun options. Think I have a ranking, and it starts with a tie for 4th, or a 3rd, I guess. And that is between Chris and Tanner.
Oh,
I hate to say it, but like, I was persuaded by Joe that the negative aspects of Tiger's career have been very overshadowing, and it's just not what I found to be a good idea for entertainment. Although, Chris, between you and me, like it's you know how I feel about Tiger and how much I love him, but this hurts. Definitely. It hurts me as well as you, I'm sure. And so that just means, Tanner, it was comparing your argument for Steph against the other two, and Shaq and Muhammad Ali they're just giants. And at a certain point, it has to be the quality of the entertainment as well as the quantity. The fact that Muhammad Ali has won the world title. What is that called, David? What's the highest ranking?
World Heavyweight Championship.
The fact that he's won that twice, that is a huge story. And Shaq is just, from what I was hearing, is just that much more of an icon just because he was able to branch out that much. But y'all, it was very close. And I guess I should reveal the number 1. Drum roll, please. It's Joe's argument for Shaquille O'Neal.
You bet.
Boo.
As much as that hurts to pass on a victory to Big Joe himself.
To the rival.
Yeah. I think the argument of humor as an attribute for an entertaining athlete is a very strong one. Kind of this is where David's argument, I think, lined up with Chris's, and that, like, David, your argument was that Muhammad Ali was also a huge news figure. I think Joe's idea of what an entertainer was, in addition to their athleticism, was just a bit more accurate, or at least it's just lined up with what I was kind of feeling for this argument. So there you go. Congrats, Big Joe.
Nice job, Joe.
Thank you.
Good job, Joe.
Good job, Joe.
I just looked up the definition of entertainment, and I think my personal definition is more cynical. So I would have to now agree with the judge's ruling, because the definition says the action of providing or being provided with amusement or enjoyment. And I have not been amused or enjoyed by Tiger's actions in a while.
No, the Tiger is the least entertaining athlete now.
I'm going to say that Chris was 8 years too late for his argument, and I was about 8 years too early for mine.
Man, can you imagine how much of a no-brainer that would have been in 2001?
And yeah,
I had a cynical view. He still draws eyes despite horrid athletic success.
All right. Yeah, on to debate number 2, which is, should mixed martial arts do away with decisions? Tanner and I are going for there should be decisions in mixed martial arts.
Okay, so I would like it if we started off, because I'm an idiot about this stuff, if each team kind of explained what decisions are and what kind of the center of this whole debate is from your perspective.
Yeah, I'll give some background on the question and then go into our points. So, mixed martial arts has had decisions, same as boxing, for as long as the sport's been around. MMA adopted boxing scoring system, the 10-point must system. So there has been some controversy around that system and if they should change it up to be more specifically adapted to mixed martial arts, as well as there have been some judges' rulings, actually a bunch in the last few years, that have been controversial. The clear winner of the fight was not picked by the judges, most of the time losing in split decisions. So that's kind of where this debate question came from. Tanner and I are going to argue that judges have to stay in MMA and the UFC. There's just no way to force fighters to finish each other by submission or knockout that is going to work. The game includes too many different aspects of mixed martial arts, which includes stand-up, ground game, takedowns. There's no good way to force fighters to finish and to get rid of decisions altogether. We would argue, however, that the way judges make decisions needs to be overhauled, but we still think it definitely needs to stay around for the sport.
I can think of a good way. Joe, can you think of a good way?
I can think of one or two, sure.
Yeah, dude, what a coincidence. Why not have fighters be put into a ring and the fight is over when someone taps or when someone is ruled not eligible to defend himself properly, aka a knockout? It's an open-ended question.
So your solution is for a fight to go on forever if nobody's submitted or knocked out?
Yeah. We have, technically, Major League Baseball games can go on forever. Technically, overtime, hockey, basketball, and football can go on until the earth ends. It's not probable. There would be longer fights than there are in an average time since now. But also, that provides for some of the most exciting and, may I say, entertaining spectacle to watch. Because the more tired and worn down or beaten down some of these fighters might get, the more they're stumbling, the closer they are to getting knocked out. And then maybe you have a guy who's about to be submitted or get knocked out, and he just lands a haymaker. It could be one of the best events in sports of all time.
I would argue the exact opposite. Fights are the least entertaining when fighters are tired, when fighters don't have the strength left to throw a punch that would be capable of knocking the other person out. If a fight just went on forever, it'd be the most boring thing ever. The entertainment value for the sport would go down so much that nobody would watch fights that are lasting like 50 minutes. That would not make them more entertaining.
But that's because these fighters know that there's a cap on the time in this. When they get tired, they can dance around and just kind of avoid each other because they think they've got the decision in hand. If they know it's not going to end until someone is knocked out or tapping, then I think you'll see a drastically different end to fights, even if fighters are very tired.
Every single sport has a referee, just a plain layout, the necessity of judges. There's no sport that exists where it's a free-for-all. And Chris, to just answer your question directly, it's because concussions exist. And it's the same reason why NFL helmets get better every year. It's reason why kickoffs are 20 yards closer, all that stuff. It's just, I mean, your job's literally just to get the tar beat out of you. And, there's only so much someone can take. If you look at how fights happen as far as timelines go, your prize fighters are fighting like once a year, maybe twice a year if they fight like early on into the year. And it's because of the toll that they take. You look at Ronda Rousey, who was the most dominant person in women's UFC by a substantial margin. And she got knocked out hard and didn't fight for another year and a half. And because of that, women's UFC, the popularity diminished because people weren't seeing, and I'm not trying to take a dig on women's UFC, but they weren't seeing Ronda Rousey in that ring. So they weren't watching it as often, and it hurt women's UFC, I would imagine. Conor McGregor fights once a year because people want to see him fight. And if you throw him in the ring over and over and over again and he gets knocked out every time or literally just drains himself X amount of rounds past the standard, you're not going to see Conor McGregor fight for a cool minute. And the fans want to see their fighters fight. Promoters want to see their fighters win. And you can't win if you're not fighting.
I think you guys are kind of like thinking maybe a little bit is that like UFC fights, you want them to be more realistic to how a real fight would go. If a fight was totally realistic, that would mean, first of all, no gloves. That would mean no rounds. That would just mean one long round that went on until somebody quit, essentially, or the ref stopped it because it was a TKO. But that's just not going to work for the sport of MMA. MMA started out more like that. They had longer rounds. They didn't have gloves. They could kick each other in the balls. But MMA is popular today because they structured it. They gave them small gloves that made it seem a little more civilized. They put some rounds on it and they used judges to make a decision because nobody wants to watch a fight that goes more than 25 minutes. Boxing fights go 36 and that bores a lot of people. So making it any longer than that and having the average fight be a lot longer than they are now, I think is a terrible idea for the sport. It makes it a lot less entertaining and makes the structure of the competition less.
First off, I just want to say, you mentioned Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor draws a spectacle every single time he fights. And the reason he draws a spectacle is because of the knockouts. If he says, I'm going to drop this guy in the 4th round, that was my sweet Irish accent, he is going to drop him in the 4th round, and people are going to love it every time. And you said judges, they're in other sports. That's not true. Refs are in every sport. You're right. You're totally right about that. And there are refs in the UFC, and we're not arguing that we should take the refs out of the UFC. Refs are there to make sure the game is played fairly. Judges are there to decide the game. In football, you decide the game by playing, by scoring, and whoever scores more wins. In basketball, whoever scores more wins. The refs don't decide the winner. But in the UFC, you have this weird sport where the judges are the ones who can end up deciding who wins and who loses. And there's been so many examples of just divided, both fan and media complaints against the judges. And then this point about how the knockouts, you won't get the knockouts until 50 minutes or, 2 hours into the fight. But the more tired the person gets, the more likely they are to be knocked out. So I don't think we're going to see that many of these like super long fights where one person's dodging. Eventually someone's going to get tired. Someone's going to get exhausted. They're going to start throwing punches to end the fight. Someone's going to get knocked down. I think it'll be faster than you think. And I just don't want a sport that's run by the clock. I want a sport, probably the only pure sport, where one person is guaranteed to come out on top regardless of any bias.
Except for golf.
Joe, I mean, I was really curious to see what you guys came up with as far as your solution for getting rid of decisions. I'll say I'm very disappointed in your solution being that there's no time limit. That makes the sport very boring. I was hoping you would come up with something more like a sudden death type of situation. And in some Brazilian jiu-jitsu tournaments nowadays, they have something where if nobody has submitted each other by the end of the round, they give them each a chance in the same position to submit the other. That works with jiu-jitsu. It would not work with mixed martial arts because you can't force somebody on the ground when they're a stand-up fighter. It's just not fair because the sport covers a bunch of different areas. So there's really no good solution in my mind, especially making the fights an unlimited time limit. That just would make the sport terribly boring.
Okay, David, I have to strongly disagree because you're just assuming things from fights that have never actually been put in this situation. You say fans don't want to see fights go on for 25 minutes. Let me tell you what fans really don't want to see. They don't want to come and pay $2,500 for a ringside seat and then see two fighters dance around each other because they're too prideful to put themselves in a situation to get knocked out. Fans want to see fighters going at each other, and I do think if this was actually an implemented rule and fighters knew that they could not get out of that fight just by dancing around, you would see the sport change. The fight would change. We're not asking for it to be more like street fighting. We're literally imposing one rule where that decisions are not a part of it. Another big bonus for that. Boxing is effectively dead now. It used to be the most popular sport in the country, and it's dead. And it is primarily dead for two reasons. A, corruption in judging and horrible judgment, which you kind of alluded to in your opening statement. And B, because of really bad fights where people come and are so defensive that it's incredibly boring to watch. You can effectively put an end to those solutions or to those issues with just uncapping the time limit for a UFC fight and forcing it to end in tap out or in a knockout. Who's to say UFC won't follow the same road as boxing?
There are few penalties in the UFC. Being too tentative is one of them. Fighters can literally get penalized, taking points away for dancing around too often. I can tell you that if the Pacquiao-Mayweather fight was a UFC fight, well, I actually think Mayweather might have landed more strikes, if I remember right. The point is, it's not a thing that you can just do for 5 straight rounds in the UFC like it is that you can do in 12 straight rounds in boxing. Fighters fight in the UFC. Perfect.
Our fights will never go 5 straight rounds then.
I'm saying that decisions are a necessity. Chris, if I was the fan who paid $2,500 to see Conor McGregor fight someone, I'd way rather watch an absolute war that goes 5 rounds than see him knock someone out in 13 seconds just for the sake of getting my money's worth out of the fight.
Okay, but here's the thing is by no means do you eliminate a 13-second knockout with the current situation of the rules. And the Ronda Rousey thing...
No, I agree.
...happen within the current situation of the rules. There's always... I mean, if you're looking to avoid injury, you're in the wrong sport. This is the sport where you will get your body most harmed by far.
It seems like both sides have things to say about the entertainment value and the quality of the competition and corruption. But before we go into closing statements, I was wondering if you guys could kind of boil down what you think the most important part of your argument is in relation to the entire sport, whether it's like any of those things I just mentioned or something I hadn't even thought of.
Having watched the most UFC fights out of anybody on this podcast, I would say that the most competitive fights, the ones that go to decisions and are super competitive and exciting, those fights would fizzle out and be boring because going past 3 rounds or 5 rounds, the human body isn't even conditioned to go that far. The fighters would... much what makes boxing boring. They go more rounds, they get more tired, and they end up just leaning on each other and not having the power to finish the fight by knockout. I feel like the most competitive fights where they're an even matchup, the fact that there are rounds to win and to win the judge's decision in those rounds makes it exciting because those fighters can try to win that round. It's still exciting. They still have to do work. They still have to do damage. But if it was just one endless round, the fighters that are really closely matched would end up just being tired and not being able to finish the fight, and it would go on indefinitely. I just cannot see how a round that doesn't have an end without judges could be, yes, it could be exciting in some situations, but in most situations that go the distance, the infinite distance, it would make UFC fights way less entertaining.
My main argument against that is that you're basing your analysis off all of the historical footage and fights you've seen. And I just think there would be a huge shift in strategy and mentality if this rule was implemented, because we really have nothing to compare it to. We've never had a pro sport that has been a fight to knockout or submission before. So all these images you have in your head of two boxers leaning on each other in the 11th round because they're zonked, I think those boxers in a UFC cage with knowing that they had to be to submit or knock out the other guy would be way more aggressive. And there's honestly a chance that the average time of fights could actually decrease because you could just see people lose all sorts of defensive mentality knowing that if you want to win, you have to knock someone out or submit them.
Okay, I like what I hear. I will give you both sides 30 seconds in closing.
Each person or each side?
I changed my mind. Each person gets 20 seconds.
Okay.
Joe, you go first.
Yeah, great. Look, I just want to back up what Chris said about this whole thing being very speculative because we haven't really seen fighting like this. And I want to bring up two important points. One is that when you look back at the last time that we've had fights that have gone to completion, we're talking about way back in the Gladiators, and let me tell you, people ate that up. Now, those are fights to the death. These would only be fights to knockout, much less gruesome, but people will still love it. And the second point, I totally forgot, but I'm just going to go ahead and say that it would draw more of a spectacle. This is all speculation, so we don't know how it's going to end, but I think that it would end by people fighting less defensively, more aggressively, and eventually the mob rule of the crowd would encourage these people to finish the fight.
All right, Chris, go.
I completely agree with what Joe said. I think I've made all my points. The only other point that I didn't address is Tanner expressed concerns over injury. A, you're in the wrong sport if you're concerned about being injured. And B, if we're using the NFL as an example, we've learned nothing more than that the American sports viewing public does not actually care about athlete health. They care about watching their sports. Ever since the concussion stuff has come about and player safety in the NFL has become a legitimate concern, NFL viewership has done nothing but go up.
On Chris's thing, people do like to watch their sports and they like to watch them at the highest capacity. I think that if you wear all of your prize fighters thin, constantly, through never-ending fights and through just taking a massive beatdown, I don't think the entertainment value is as high. I think decisions are necessary now and they're always going to be necessary. I don't really see a world where they're not. And as for being concerned with injury, I understand UFC is the most brutal in the world. I just feel like there needs to be a regulation to the brutality.
Okay, I'll close. So one of your main points is you think that getting rid of the time limit will make the fight more entertaining, will result in more knockouts and finishes exclusively. But I would argue that the opposite, that getting rid of the time limit would decrease the entertainment value. It would stretch them out way too long. They'd become boring snooze fests where, yeah, there might be a finish at the end, but it'd be a lame finish compared to what they can do in 3 or 5 rounds now. Also, I think the current judging system, even the rounds, the times of the rounds should be changed. I would much rather like the first round to be something more like 10 minutes for less interference, and the judging 10-point must system to change because that's an antiquated boxing system. But I still feel like the judging is very necessary for the sport to stay legitimate, and nobody wants to see gladiator fights now, Joe. The New York State Athletic Commission just approved MMA to be in their state. If you want them to be murdering each other in there, that's just taking the sport back to the 90s where it started.
People do want to see gladiators. The movie Gladiator grossed $187 million.
This one was actually a little bit easier to judge, I thought. And I think David and Tanner won.
Ayo.
Because when it came down to what you guys' core arguments were, you both seemed to be talking about the entertainment of MMA fighting and bringing up like kind of traditional aspects. Like Joe talked about gladiator fighting and just like how much fun it'd be to watch. But Chris and Joe, you also were really hammering on how the other side's argument wasn't very valid because in this world that you proposed, the sport would be changing so much. I think you hammered that so hard that I kind of got the impression that like what you're proposing wouldn't really resemble MMA fighting anymore and therefore wasn't really addressing the question we were arguing. But I loved the point Joe made. Originally, I really liked what Tanner had to say about the fact that every sport has referees and how important they are. But Joe, your distinction that judges are not referees, I thought actually like, I was like, oh yeah, that's a good point. I had totally not even thought of that. Yeah, great debate, guys. Happy to judge it and really enjoyed listening.
Nice work, Tanner.
Thanks, David.
First time guest and a debate winner.
Yes. 1 and 2. 1 for 2, I guess. Lifetime.
Let's make t-shirts.
Hopefully I'll be back.
Very nice.
Rough night for Chris.
And thank you for coming back, Chris, as well.
Ah, you're welcome.
And thank you, audience, for tuning in. We're going to release this one on a special day of the week on a Monday so that you have a full week to listen to it every day of the week in preparation for the Mayweather-McGregor fight. So you get excited. Also, a reminder, comment on our social media posts or email us at hosteldiscourse@gmail.com with your debate ideas or your answers for the debates, and we'll read them on the show and give you a shout out. Okay, before we close out the show, everyone give a round number and who's going to win and by what. I'll go Mayweather by decision round 12.
Boring.
Chris?
You're going to see a Conor McGregor knockout in round 3.
Ooh, I hope. Tanner?
I agree with David. However, what I would like to see is McGregor knockout round 4.
Very nice. Okay, Jacob?
I guess I'll go Mayweather in 10. I think it's going to just be like way too long and not as fun as everyone thought, much like the most recent super hyped boxing match.
Okay, Mayweather finishes it in round 10. Joe, what's yours?
I was going to say McGregor, but everyone else took my answer. So here's the thing. Mayweather beats him round 1.
Nice.
Wow.
I hope you're right,
man.
Joe.
That's a hot sports take.
Straight blast in like 2 seconds.
Straight blast.
Okay, we will see you in a couple weeks. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye-bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Peace, homies.
In honor of Jared, so long.
Thanks for listening to Hostel Discourse. Subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. And check out our other social media accounts linked in the show notes. Join us next time for more inexhaustible debate over the most questionable of topics.